Hello, I'm from Skovgard. I am working for GlobalNet 21, and we have about 75 meetings and webinars a year talking about different issues with speakers and meeting face-to-face or webinars. So tonight we have a webinar with Elizabeth Bailey talking about online abuse and political chat. The talk tonight is more for discussions that you can provide input and come with discussions. So welcome to Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Should I start?
Yes, please.
To introduce myself. For those who don't know me, and a few of you do, I'm Elizabeth Bailey. This presentation, which was arranged at quite short notice, well, presentation is actually a discussion, I hope, and it's all about the PhD research I've been doing, and it's great to have a chance to speak to you today. I should be clear what my aim is in doing this. It's about, I'm really interested in your perspectives on the questions and topics I'm raising, because it's about things that I think most of us regard as slightly problematic. What I'm not here to do is to offer exhortations and tell you how we should be behaving online and that kind of thing. That's really not what I'm about. I'm increasingly familiar from all the interviews I've been doing and the research I've been doing on top of that, are the reasons why people don't necessarily behave impeccably online. So really, I'm interested in your perspectives on what the difficulties are now after a couple of years of us all doing this, how it could be made better, and actually if making things better is ultimately desirable, if that makes sense. So the quote at the top, "I get it all me," is from a very interesting man. I call him, I give him a pseudonym Mick. He's a real person. He's a truck driver from the West Midlands. He's very active talking about politics online. He's had quite a dramatic brush with parts of the Labour Party over his opinions about the direction of the party. And sorry, I can't suddenly try and speak, but he's kept me abreast of his experiences, which are really quite interesting. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this later.
Rockets.
Okay. So what I've been doing, I've basically interviewed, I've been around the country, I've interviewed 50 or 60 people, I've run 3 focus groups, and I've done 2 webinars with GN21. So I've basically heard from about 90 voices. And as I said, I gave a webinar here last year, and I got some very helpful observations which have fed into my research. So I'm really glad to be back, talking broadly about the same topic. But I think what's different is that we've, year on year, we're getting used to this environment, and we're adapting our behaviour, and we're learning about it, and our perspectives are changing. So I think, you know, that's the kind of thing I want to hear from you. Basically, we know that online and social media have given people a lot of opportunity to talk to each other and outside their normal groups if they want to do that. And that's a great thing. And also address very fundamental political topics like we do on GN21. So I've been asking people about their very human experiences of this quite revolutionary happening. And how they've experienced, I mean, technical word is a phenomenography, so it's how they've experienced it from their different points of view. Really, if you are interested in the theoretical side of all of this, it's about the internet as a public sphere, as conceived by Jürgen Habermas, who's basically considered the founding father of theory about the public sphere, and the instigator of a lot of, I suppose, theoretical study of deliberative democracy in the public sphere. And because he's, you know, because of his status in this sort of field, when we talk about social media in academic terms, we do make this comparison with the ideal of the sort of post-Renaissance public sphere, where people outside of formal government chat to each other about important political matters, and do so in a rational, deliberative and discursive way. So there's obviously been a lot of discussion about this in relation to social media. Habermas and the idea of the public sphere has its critics, and one of them was Nancy Fraser, who pointed out that obviously a lot of people are excluded from those kind of environments. Those kind of very rational, educated, deliberative environments are quite privileged and quite well educated. And I will go on a little bit later to talk about exclusions in that respect. So although we question the idea of the availability of everyone to this rational public sphere, it's still this idea we cling to. And I think we do think that way on GN21. We think about, that's our ideal, this the polite, civilized, rational, discursive environment. But to just a little bit more theory, there's also an idea of, by Chantal Mouffe, who's a Marxist scholar, of agonistic pluralism. So she's essentially saying this, it's impossible that we achieve a fully inclusive rational consensus about everything. And this agonism, and not antagonism necessarily, but agonism, is part of a healthy public sphere. But she's been a bit skeptical about the potential for the internet to deliver this. So I'll talk about what we actually do online. And we don't just talk about politics, we go on social media and we talk about our whole lives. So we talk about our joy and our sadness. I mean, I hear about people's marriages and their bereavements and so on. And in the same space, I will hear about their views about politics. It's a terrifically human environment. But my view is it's, on lots of levels, it's a behavioural frontier, and we're interacting with stimuli and triggers and social and cultural challenges that we've never had to deal with before. And to call on an idea from sociology and Irving Goffman, this idea of definition of situation, there's lots of situations where we have a clear definition of the situation. We know broadly how to behave in a courtroom, for example, but we don't really have a shared definition of the situation of social media. And I think that's behind a lot of the problems that we encounter. Now, I'm whipping through a bit, and I hope we'll have quite a lot to chat about at the end. But I'm going on to things that we, as people who like to talk about politics and policy online, run into quite a lot. So I think those of us who have engaged in online political discussion will, at least from time to time, have run into quite difficult circumstances. We'll have run into argument and challenge. And as my many interviewees have told me time and again, we'll just run into people who will not be shifted from their point of view. And that's a very frustrating experience. I've had people tell me they felt enervated by it, exhausted, and so on. But there's a lot of written in political science about why this happens. And it's not just political science, it's also about neuroscience and neurobiology and so on. But researchers showed that the willingness of people to be openly hostile towards those with different political opinions is so strong that it's actually stronger in most people's minds than racism. When people feel racism, the emotion appears to be stronger when they're dealing with political partisanship. And this is Iyengar and Westwood also point out, there's ample opportunity for those in power to exploit this weakness we have for polarization and division. So there's all kinds of factors in this, but partisanship really depends on very deep moral emotions. and it's processed very automatically when we talk online, and it's quite difficult to change in other people because people's fast thinking responses say, no, my values are this, and you'll have come across that. And these values are set quite young. I mean, almost we'd say epigenetically, they're so inculcated, often in childhood at the kitchen table. And my interviewees would say, I learned this at the kitchen table. It's like the Jesuits getting you before you were 7. It's very inculcated, and it's very difficult to change, and it's called up very quickly. And it's linked to a lot of personality characteristics. And we do say that a big part of any political partisanship, wherever you are on the political spectrum, there's a strong element of self-deception. And if that sounds a bit rude, I apologise, but what they mean by that is we will turn a blind eye sometimes to discrepancies and so on in what our favoured political parties are saying to us, if it causes us too much cognitive dissonance. So there's a lot going on neurobiologically to shape the way we act and think. So if you look at traditional theories of information processing, these would suggest that individuals would update their political positions in response to new information, consistent with what they learned. But we can consistently demonstrate that actually you get something called backfire effect. So when people push their political opinions on you, you get this backlash or boomerang effect, which actually leads you to digging your heels in and becoming more firmly entrenched. And many of my interviewees described this process to me. I spoke to the MP Jess Phillips, and she said she had got so much fire from certain quarters that it made her dig her heels in and take a more extreme position. But I was also told that by ordinary people. And really, that stuff is resistant to the facts. People would dig their heels in and not be moved, even when the facts challenge those views. So I'll go on a little bit, I don't go on too long. As I say, I spoke to, or got feedback from around 90 people. But these are a few of the people I spoke to. And Jess Phillips is very interesting. She was at one point receiving 600 rape threats a day. And if you read, she's written a book about it. And it's to do really about her position in the Labour Party in relation to other people's. And the Labour Party leadership debate is one of my contextual case studies because it has caused a lot of polarisation. And I'll give you a little quote from Jess in a minute. But Tarek, it's not his real name, these are all mostly pseudonyms. He's just an ordinary bloke in Luton. And he went through a process of realization of how he found himself in echo chambers before the last election. He was surprised by both the EU referendum and the last election result, because he had been entirely surrounded by like-minded people in Facebook, and he really wasn't seeing challenging views, and he felt quite uncomfortable by that. Mick, I mentioned to you before, he is very much involved. Shame I can't identify, it was quite an interesting story, but he's been very much involved in the debate over the Labour Party leadership, and he's really locked horns with some people in certain quarters, to the extent his story has become a bit of a cause célèbre. And it's all to do really with the way he's been expressing himself online, and that has been challenged. I probably won't go into detail about the rest, but very briefly, Liz was an ordinary local Lib Dem activist who managed to upset somebody online and was stalked aggressively for more than a year and had to take legal action. Mairead stood up for the Women's Equality Party and got a tremendous amount of abuse. And Mike, that's his real name, Mike Stookbury, he's quite interesting. He he's a journalist, a British Canadian journalist who takes on the alt-right. So he takes on the Pepe the Frog people and so on. And his story is very, very interesting. But he's had people stopping outside his house. He's been doxxed. He's had all manner of terrible experiences. So these are the kind of things people say to me about the more extreme experience of talking online and the very visceral physical experience of being dogpiled or people challenging you at scale. And this idea of a backdraft in a fire or beaten back with stuff, it conveys that physical experience. So Jess said it was absolutely horrendous. She was very, very upset. I mean, she's worked with abused women, so she's not, you know, protected at all. But she felt, I keep hearing this word, tired or enervated, like being punched in the stomach. And I've had feedback from people on GN21 and other people who've talked about this. It's a physical experience. And so it shouldn't be treated lightly. I think that somebody commented on the page, it's a form of abuse. And certainly if you're getting it, it feels like a form of abuse. So we have a little look about, you know, some of the factors behind this kind of thing. We know quite a lot about the formation of echo chambers. If you want to know more about that, go onto the Demos think tank website, because there's been some very recent research, and I spoke at a conference with one of the researchers recently, and there's also very interesting research by the Oxford Internet Institute, which is all big data research. So that can tell you a lot about the people do polarize, they do form echo chambers, it can be measured. There is a tendency towards confirmation bias, which is we actually seek information that backs up. We choose a position first, then we go and seek the information that backs that up. So we don't, behaviorally, we don't make rational decisions based on reading. We choose our decision and then we back it up most often. Some will be offended by the term virtue signaling, but I just see it, it's a behavior, and it's about the presentation of self. And if you're interested in Irving Goffman, it's a bit related to that. A lot of this behavior comes from very natural human tendencies, one of which is homophily, which birds of a feather stick together. We naturally gravitate towards people like ourselves. And it's a slightly interesting experiment, but I have a lot of my friends are sort of left of centre, liberal minded, so and so. And they will all say, I'm not racist. And they'll put memes up saying, I'm not racist. So I often go on their friends list to see how many Facebook the friends they've got of different ethnicities. And it's amazing how often they don't have many friends of different ethnicities. So I'm not saying that makes them bad people, but what I'm saying is it proves homophily. We do tend to mix with people like ourselves. Another factor is, and it's very important nowadays, the idea of identity. We take it very seriously. It's a big way of looking at politics, and how we define our identity and how we act it out online is also a big factor. So I might say to you, and my background is a working class woman from Liverpool. So if you're classist, I might get angry about that, you know. There's also practical things about the way we deal with challenge and cognitive dissonance, because we tend to use fast thinking ahead of slow thinking in that immediate situation. And there's a whole range of well-documented cognitive biases that I've mentioned, a confirmation bias, for example, where we tend to think in certain ways automatically, and they're sort of thinking errors because they're not totally rational. And you can see a lot of these in online political behaviour. So very briefly, what are the factors that affect the way we interact online? Well, there's quite a lot: sociological, psychological and physiological. Education, obviously, that's an important, and I'll just mention the matter of epistemic injustice. This is the Miranda Fricker's idea, and it's the idea that some people do not have the knowledge and they haven't had the opportunity to develop the knowledge and skills, to express their own circumstances and articulate them well. And a good example of that is the girls who were groomed and, is it Rotherham, and abused. They weren't taken seriously for a long time because they were not skilled in articulating their own experience as well. So when we encounter people who have poor grammar and spelling and can't express themselves online, often we tend to feel scornful towards them, but you know, is that fair if they haven't had those life skills? There's things about our own self-awareness, and I don't want to go on too long, but I did a great experiment where I asked people about, first I asked them about whether they think what they say online politically is effective in persuading other people. And most of them say, some say no, some say yes, quite a lot say yes. And then I asked them, when was the last time you had your mind changed about a political matter? And nobody has given me an answer. Nobody. So it shows you, we think we're better at persuading other people than they are at persuading us, which is interesting. But there's other things that will affect the way we act online. Our socialization, normative notions, what we think is proper and right to be online. Some people would never talk about their personal life. I mean, Francis said he wouldn't like to talk about his personal life. A lot of older men say that to me, from all kinds of cultural backgrounds. Our personal circumstances can affect it. Mental health is a big factor. And I had a very interesting interview with somebody who had quite severe mental health challenges and expressed themselves in quite an atypical way, but was determined that they wanted to have their voice heard. And that made for a very, very interesting interview in terms of representation and disability and so on. And lastly, we do need to think about, we tend to think about preserving our identity, our integrity, and minimizing cognitive dissonance, which is that uncomfortable feeling when we're challenged. So just whip forward. Being on social media companies have teams of psychologists whose job is to make sure that the system or what's in front of you is triggering particular responses in your brain. So it's acting on your fast thinking mechanisms. If you read Dan Kahneman's book, Fast and Slow Thinking, you'll know what this means, but it triggers your immediate reactions, your impulsiveness, your fight or flight, and works on your cognitive dissonance. And obviously the things that go viral are certain things that tend to work well online because they have this polarizing mechanism, and things around identity are a key point. I'll just go very quickly through the dim person's guide to neuroscience. I'm not a neuroscientist. This is not about biological determinism. I'm not saying your brain is just ordering you around. It's a bit more complicated than that. But social media is connected to several chemicals produced in the brain, which are dopamine, oxytocin, and adrenaline. And dopamine is quite interesting because it's a chemical involved in addiction, and it's also involved in seeking behavior. So this thing about the internet where we click and we click through and we keep clicking through, we're getting lots of dopamine hits. So we're getting dopamine rewards from doing that. Oxytocin is the, are you okay, hun? It's a warm feeling. It's a love hormone. And obviously adrenaline's speed, stress, anxiety, and that kind of thing. So some theorists, Gaisley and Rosen, argue that many difficulties we have online are owing to the inability of our ancient brains to adapt quickly to a new environment. Our brains have a limited attention span, and we don't really multitask. What we do is switch rapidly between tasks. So the distractions and interruptions offered by technology work very effectively with our heads. So it's very hard to say no to that red dot, isn't it? very hard. So I want to hear from you, I hope, but I'll just some thoughts about this. Talking about politics online is particularly difficult, and it's very easy to slip into aggression and abuse. It can be very difficult to see the other person as a whole person, because it makes other people you don't know particularly easy to objectify because they're one step removed. We have behavioural false consensus ideas. We expect people to think and react more like we do, but they often don't. There's also no consensus about how we should behave. And all of these trends play out in trends in big data. And I'm not the only one to have said that really, well, it's a hard one to change, but one way of doing it is looking at the man in the mirror and exactly how we behave ourselves in those environments. I just whipped through some tips offered recently in the Atlantic magazine. You might think they're total nonsense, and I'm quite happy to hear that. They suggest seek truth, not victory. Prioritize the relationship with the person you're talking to and listen. Pay attention to their context, and be very emotionally intelligent if you can. Embrace your own vulnerability and be prepared to say if you're wrong or extend an olive branch. And be open, because if you can't change minds if you aren't willing to have your mind changed, is essentially the case. So I'd just like to invite people's views on, have you had experience of this kind of thing? Can we make things better? Is it actually desirable to make things better? Is that negating an agonistic public sphere and being tone policemen? Do we just sit this out because it's a learning, it's like the Wild West, we just have to go through it? And what, if anything, do you think can be done?
Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. It's quite informative and surprising, because I didn't expect it to be that way. But you are talking a lot about psychology, about like we choose to think, we have decided what we want to think and then back it up later.
Yeah, that's proof. There's a lot of research to back that up.
Yes. And what makes us choose that we want to think that way, just to be on the trend with other people? Or
there's some very, first off, to avoid, it's not about biological determinism, but there are characteristics in the brain that have been observed in the people on different parts of the political spectrum. So you have a larger amygdala and you're more prone to anxiety. That often makes people more conservative in their views. It's not uniform, but it's a trend, if you like. And if your family are like that, you might have similar views. And if you sit around the kitchen table when you're very young and inculcate your children with certain views of the world, you know, the Jesuits used to say if they got somebody before they were 7 years old, they'd have them for life. There's a grain of truth in that, because those ideas you're instilled with at a very young age can be very, very hard to overcome.
I think it is the two different things I'm thinking of. The thing that you are saying that you get from your parents when you are 7 years old, it's like a value. It's like some parents, they think that table manners are important. Some parents that just don't think it's important. So that's what I call for values and belief in what you think should be right or wrong. But like adult people talking about politics on Facebook or Twitter, like you and me, adult, and if I heard something and then I could choose to believe in it before I had any backup to say that's what I really mean. That's what I meant. I meant it is surprisingly that people are thinking that way, even though they are adults. They have their own value and beliefs already. So
it's complicated. I think it's actually complicated, and but you know, you need to come back to this notion of fast and slow thinking, because the fast thinking, your immediate response is often calling on very ingrained and inculcated values, but if you think it through and use your slow thinking mechanisms, you might say, oh, actually, that other person has a point, and it's not so cut and dried, da-di-da-di-da. But your ability to use that slow thinking process can be affected by a lot of things. Some of those things are to do with well-being, your state of mind.
Yes. So you are saying, I'm just asking questions because I don't understand it properly. So you are saying that if you are not content, if you are not relaxed, it could have impact on the way you are thinking, the way the decision you are making.
Oh yes, I mean I'm saying lots of factors can, and not just not being relaxed. It could be I didn't try to recruit people with mental health problems and cognitive disabilities and brain injury, but I did actually by accident interview a number of people who've lived with those characteristics. And when we talk about the rational, deliberative public sphere, you not only have to have learning and skills to do that kind of thing, you also have to have abilities. And some people don't have that full range of ability. You know, they don't think and talk for various reasons in that desirable way. But do we say to them, your voice shouldn't be heard in the public sphere? I think not. So I guess it's a puzzle to me. I don't know the answer to it.
Yes, and also normally, do you think that people speak about their political view on the social media?
Do I think they do what?
Yeah, they talk about their political view. Yeah. Do they?
Do they? Yeah, they do a lot. I do. I mean, I watch people talking about their political views, and I interview them about it. And what I would say is, I think it's dropped off a bit over time. I haven't got the data from somewhere like Facebook to prove that, but I notice in my own circles, people are a little less willing to talk about contentious topics because of the struggle they have getting anywhere.
Yes. Because like you also talk about being biased, and sometimes, you know, I call it like situational dependent on when sometimes you choose to think about this way, but tomorrow the situation can be a little bit different, so you can make a different decision even though it's kind of the same situation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, it's very chaotic situation, and there's lots of different influencing factors all the time.
Yes, but okay, I have a lot to ask you, but I think that Peter, he said he agreed with the tips given from Atlantic. But Peter, do you have any comment to what you are saying there?
Yes, I think the ideal thing would be if we could just let go of the need to be seen as the winner of every single argument, no matter what, whether we're right or wrong, is one thing. The other thing that's interesting, picking up on Elizabeth's point, is the oxytocin response. A Facebook executive who quit the company recently said that Facebook was designed to stimulate that. So every time you got a like, or you issued a like, or whatever it was that you were seeing as contributing, that gave you a hit of being valued outside of yourself. And I think that's a very fundamental point on these things. You didn't think through the consequences.
No, it's quite interesting. It's cleverness, but not wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah. The other thing is, on the parenting point you were discussing, I think the young people pick up a lot of cues from the way that their parents deal with each other, and they can regard that as their reality and move through the rest of their life based on that, unless they evolve further. Some can't evolve, so they stay there, and some are stubbornly committed to their set of beliefs and won't change them no matter what proof could exist. And the last but interesting point is that we are being stimulated by false news purveyors, the media, and all the rest of it, to believe in certain things or to try to influence us that way. And that is just a constant 24/7 onslaught. I think that is a big problem nowadays.
You're right.
Yes, I agree with you. Tony, do you have any comment to what we are talking about?
Yeah, I'm interested in what you could say, particularly just recently, that the points about anxiety and being conservative. I like to. I've always been different than everybody else. It doesn't work for me. I do struggle with anxiety, which does cause me problems when I get head up in an argument.
Yeah.
Also, I think the point about the younger days, well, I very much started within the Labour movement. I was born and bred within the Labour Party.
Yeah.
My first Christmas, I always remember doing work for the Labour Party on Christmas Day, even when I was about 3 or 4. But again, I've changed over the years, and I don't know where I fit these days.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, because I think the problem is that everybody is becoming, as you say, they want to win the argument, but we're not getting an argument. We're not getting a proper argument. It's what Jess Spillett is sticking her heels in, which is probably one of the reasons why I've gone away from the Labour Party. And I've found myself pulling away from everyone. I'm now no longer on social media at all.
Okay.
And this is the first GN21 discussion I've looked in on for about 3 or 4 years.
Oh, well, great to see you.
Thank you. And it's been interesting. I haven't been particularly surprised by anything you've said. Just one thing on the cultural side is that when two people from two different cultures talk, the cultures don't necessarily fit in together. It might not be the people in the discussion, because I find it with my wife, who's not English, that sometimes we see things differently and have an argument we shouldn't have done. It was purely and simply because of our cultural upbringing.
Yeah, there's a lot of miscommunication. It's quite interesting. You'll often see two people who actually agree with each other arguing because they don't quite understand what the way each other is to express themselves. It's quite funny.
So just we try to focus on the questions to see what we can contribute to your research.
Well, I am quite interested in, to repeat the question is, can we make things better? Is it always desirable to make things better? Do we just sit it out and let it happen? Or do you think there's something that could be done? I mean, there's one writer, Christian, I should say his name's Fouche, I think I'm trying to say it right and not sound rude. He said he's proposed something like a public service, internet service. So like the BBC, only for, that's one possibility, I guess. Whether people behave themselves on that, I don't know. Because it's not really the fact of who's in control, I guess, so much as who's using it. Does anybody have any kind of notion about the way we might do things better?
Well, I think the thought of being able to listen to the other, and that's the problem with social media, is that you very often it's happening instantly.
Yeah.
So not there to listen in that respect. And that's a major problem for everybody. And as Peter said, you know, you've then got facing the media, which is pushing its ideas at you 24/7, and it just I just find that people are listening less and reacting more.
It's a horrible feeling when you inadvertently offend somebody by saying something perfectly innocent, but I've done it many times.
I think it is very interesting to say whether we can improve it or we want to improve it. You know, I think that we can always improve it, but I don't believe that we want to. It's maybe it's too complicated and it's too much. And we are so busy with all the information that we are getting. So what is it, you know, like you are working on this, what is the outcome that you would like to have? You would like to improve it?
Not necessarily. I mean, my view is actually we're adapting to this, and it's an evolutionary process. It'll have epigenetic effects on us, and it will affect our brains in ways that will make us different in the future. That's my view. I think we're evolving as a result of this.
So you're saying that it affects our brain, so it means that we can make our brain think a specific way, a good way.
Well, it's not. It's you know, it's this idea of epigenetics. It's a bit complicated, but to put it very crudely, your one aspect is that your life experiences can have effects on your genes that can be carried through generations. So, if your parents lived through trauma, that might affect your anxiety response. So we are living through a massive experiment in our brains, and that might have big implications for generations to come.
So how can you break the circle?
I don't know. I really don't. If I look at my own list, I think it's really about sitting it out. But I may be wrong. That's why I'm interested in what other people have to say.
Well, one way to help to break the circle is to learn how to listen to other people, which is another vector on this. People are terrible at listening to each other when they hold conflicting opinions. In fact, it's a huge learning experience they're both losing out on.
There's a good book, I think it's Andrew Dobson, called Listening for Democracy. And he's, you know, it's a very heartfelt, you know, we must listen more. But bless his heart, he's one academic against the torrent of social media. So,
so if listening would help us to improve the situation, how can we make people to listen?
Well, I always say, you know, start with the man in the mirror, listen better yourself, because that's the one person you definitely change, isn't it?
It's really exciting. It is very interesting. How can you cut off a relationship because of Brexit?
It's happened. It's happened a lot. One of the ladies I interviewed is a psychoanalyst or psychotherapist in London, and she said on the day after the EU referendum, or for 3 days afterwards, every single one of her clients brought it in as an issue that was upsetting them. They all spoke about the referendum result. And she said she's never come across that before, not with Donald Trump, not with anything, but or since. The EU referendum caused people real psychic trauma. Whichever, if you, I guess on the losing side. She came from the part of London where probably people were Remain voters. So
the whole Brexit campaign was of misinformation, disinformation, political lies, all that stuff, ably supported and abetted by the media. And then you get the trolls coming in via Cambridge Analytics and all that. So the average person didn't stand a chance to actually hear rational debate, more or less polite, between people holding different views. You know, the BBC are absolutely scandalous in that respect. So what chance do people have to evolve if they're being fed a diet of misinformation and lies, question mark? You know, I'm very upset about that side of the Brexit campaign. Whatever your views on it, for or against, we were lied to. It's ruling by fear. FUD it's called in American. Fear, uncertainty and doubt is a well-known marketing strategy.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's what we said earlier about you know, where people are easily polarized, elites can capitalize on that. It's divide and conquer.
It's just hard for me to understand that Brexit can split up to people's relationship. It's really hard. You know, Brexit is a big deal, but you know.
I've had numerous incidents reported to me of people falling out about politics. Loads, absolutely loads. It's so interesting. And you know, that research earlier that said people will put political sentiments are so strongly felt that they're felt more than racism, other kind of, you know, strong feelings. And people will absolutely cut off members of their own family. One woman she described her mother as turned into a total banshee. It's amazing to read it. It really is.
So I would like to ask questions about political view. So if you have so strong view that you could cut off a relationship because of the different political views, then the political views would be as strong as your own values.
Well, they're often tied together. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
And how can you have that strong value? You know, I don't understand. You know, like you can see Labour or Conservative people. They do different things. They say different things and they do some other things. So for me, they're kind of very alike. They just say some different things and they just do some different things. And it is difficult for me. I'm struggling to understand how, because I don't think it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me because people are lying. They don't do it anyway. So if you let it destroy your relationship with a person, the dear person, it's quite difficult for me to understand.
Yeah, it seems on one level ridiculous, doesn't it? But you know, people see their political views as a fundamental part of their identity, their integrity, and their values. And it can happen, and it does happen.
Yeah.
And you know, you realize it was clear with the Brexit business, and what was said a minute ago about, you know, it would be nice to have a civilized conversation, because I interviewed 5 or 6 Leave supporters, 3 of whom were Benite socialists, 2 of whom were UKIP members, so from different parts of the spectrum, and they all actually, you know, even the UKIP members, they all gave very rational accounts of their beliefs, and supportable. So why you see what you do on social media, heaven knows.
So when you interview, how long time is it? In an hour or 2 hours?
It's usually up to an hour.
An hour. So you listen to people. Can you see the difference between when they are listened to and then when they when they have to listen? Can you see the difference after the conversation that it helps them in a way that you listen to them?
People love being listened to. They love I had no problems recruiting people to talk about politics for an hour. No problem at all. That's why I got, you know, I easily drove at 90 people. I love listening to people. I'm talking this evening, but I actually like listening to people. It was a total pleasure, and they really enjoyed it as well. Everyone said, oh, I really enjoyed that, because they had the chance to explain why they thought, or how they felt, or how they saw the way they thought. Because I don't think we can see ourselves objectively, but we can give an account of what we think we do, if that makes sense.
So they can see that it's good for them that you listen, but they couldn't see that it could be good for them to listen themselves.
That's that question about, do you think you can change somebody's mind, and have you ever had your own mind changed? You can hear a pin drop in the recordings where they suddenly have this moment of realization that, oh yes, that it's really fascinating to listen to. You can hear like the pin drop.
We have another 5 minutes. I don't know whether Tony and Peter, you have anything else you would like to add to Elizabeth's research?
I think, you know, another point that you raised earlier, that you know, it is difficult to see the other person when you're talking on social media. I think that's very true, and you never know, you know, what that person's been through that day.
No.
And I always forget that, even when I'm talking to people face to face, you know, that you don't know what that person.
No.
I did have an argument last week with somebody, and I came back thinking that's unfair, although I was totally right, and he apologised later. I thought, but he's an old man. He shouldn't face that sort of argument from me. But that's my anxiety hitting off again.
Yeah. Do you find if you've had a difficult exchange with somebody, do you dwell on it for a long time, or?
Very often, yes.
It's painful, and but some people, it takes them a long time to think about it, but some people, they forget it straight away. So it's different personalities, isn't it?
Yeah, I think also it's a question that people and their friends tend to have similar political views, so it reinforces them amongst themselves. And the second part is they're members of that tribe, which is a powerful, we're social animals, and it's a powerful thing to belong to a tribe. So we're up against some fundamentals of human nature, and learning how to use these tools more productively for the future, as you say, Elizabeth, an evolutionary process that we have to go through. So that would be my comment.
So how far are you from coming to a conclusion of your project?
Well, I'm handing in my thesis at the end of September, but in whatever state, because this could go, it's so interesting, go forever. So for practical reasons, I'm handing it in then, because I have a lot of things on. When it will actually sort of be passed and published and so on, will probably be a little bit later on from that. So it's been a bit of an adventure. Yes.
So the PowerPoint slides, can you share it with everyone?
Yes, not the notes pages, but just the slides, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that we are very close to the end. Do you have any final remarks you could like to give to the audience?
No, just thank you for people who did come, and it's for listening to me, because it helps me to articulate my ideas, and for the comments you've made, which are always interesting. They are genuinely very helpful. Thank you.
But thanks a lot. You also gave a lot of information, a lot of insight that I didn't think of. Thanks a lot to Peter and Tony with your input and contribution to this discussion. I hope that you can use it, Elizabeth, and good luck with your project.